I'm convinced to this day I got introduced to the demonic world that night. Everything in me, around me, and just all I could hear with clarity is take her out. So I killed my high school sweetheart.
Chain me to a troubled start, with wandering feet and a restless heart.
As horrible as that crime was, it wasn't too horrible for Jesus to forgive. There is nothing that is. Tim Terry is our guest on this episode of GPS, God, People, Stories. I'm Jim Kirkland.
And I'm Phil Fleischman. Tim's story is one of redemption, not just any kind of redemption, but the kind of redemption that only Jesus Christ can make happen.
It was 30 years ago this month that Tim entered prison to start serving a 30-year sentence. A little later in this episode, you'll hear Billy Graham talk about why he thinks we're all in a prison of some sort or another.
You say, well, I'm not a prisoner, aren't you? The Bible indicates you are a prisoner. There are thousands of you sitting in this great stadium this evening that are prisoners.
But you can be set free from the prison you're in. Billy Graham explains how that works later in the episode, or you can find out right now at findpeacewithgod.net. That's findpeacewithgod.net.
GPS. God. People. Stories.
Tim Terry has walked through a lot of darkness, experienced a lot of tragedy, but that's not how life started for him. Tim remembers his mom as a God-loving woman who had a heart for Jesus.
Matter of fact, there was 4 children, and she raised us in church every time the doors were open, and was very diligent, and family altar, family devotion every night.
She was loving. She lived out her faith passionately. So Tim has never quite been able to figure out why his mom did what she did. One day when he was 14 years old.
And I get a phone call from my little 12-year-old sister, just out of the blue, just total hysteria, saying that mother took my .22 pistol, stuck it to her heart and killed herself.
It was a day, an event, that turned Tim's world upside down.
That morning when I got that phone call, and when I got to the house, and I watched them roll my mother out on the gurney with a sheet over her, I literally shook my fist in God's face with an anger that I can't even explain to this day, saying, God, if that's what I've got to look forward to when I grow up as a Christian, then leave me alone.
Tim wasn't just angry, he was hurting.
The pain and the hurt was so unsurmountable that I didn't know what else to do but to try to go on a pursuit to find something to numb the pain. Now, Mother's suicide note had pleaded with Dad on the last line of her suicide note for Dad to please keep us 4 children in a Christian school she had just enrolled us in. So I knew Dad was going to do everything in his power. But from 14 to 17, my life was just, I was just one rebellious, angry dude. That at 17, the pastor of the school sit me down and expelled me. I was causing so much chaos in the Christian school. I'm bringing marijuana to school. I'm bringing Jack Daniels. I'm just all these crazy things that totally went contrary to the faith. And he kicked me out.
I was the prodigal, once lost but now found.
That was not something Tim was prepared to tell his dad. He was afraid of his dad. So he ran away and went to live with an uncle in Miami. Turns out this uncle was a cocaine dealer.
As a 17-year-old that's away from God, mad at the world, mad at God, mad at my dad, mad at everything that stood for what was right. Man, I'm right in the middle of a party that I'm thinking, wow, this is a childhood dream come true.
After a few months of living the dream in Florida, Tim heads back to South Carolina for his high school sweetheart. They get married and have 2 children. And then they discover that Tim's wife has cancer of the uterus, and she's going to have a hysterectomy.
Her parents pleaded with us to get back in church, give our hearts back to the Lord, and rededicate our lives and let God take this tragic situation and turn it around. And we did. As a matter of fact, the pastor got my wife and got the elders of the church, and we went downstairs to a little basement church on the side of a mountain and got out a bottle of oil and opened up James 5:16, and they began to lay hands on my wife and begin to pray.
But there was no miraculous healing. Tim's wife had to have the hysterectomy. The doctor warned them that the surgery could have a big impact on her emotions. And in fact, Tim believes that it was that change in his wife's emotions that led her to leave him and ask for a divorce.
Now that Mama's gone and my wife's gone, I'm really have given up all hope. As a matter of fact, for the next 7 months, my whole life, I'm already smoking dope, I'm already drinking liquor, I'm already It's a quarter of Jack Daniels a day, and I'm already trying to numb the pain. So this escalates even more. So the pain got so much greater that I started searching for something to even numb it more and began to stick a needle in my arm. Got introduced to heroin. Then it was cocaine and then LSD. So for 7 months, I was just on a mission to try to die and just couldn't die.
Then Tim's wife called him in tears, asking to get back together. He immediately said yes, and they started making plans to move from South Carolina back to Florida. But just a couple weeks later, everything changed.
Come home on a Friday night, never will forget it. I walked into what I know now, I didn't then, was a bipolar down cycle. My wife just changed her mind, said she didn't want to get married. Matter of fact, she wanted me out by Monday. I tell you, it's like somebody reached inside my heart, pulled it out of my chest, and threw it on the ground and stomped it. I'm convinced to this day I got introduced to the demonic world that night. Everything in me, around me, and just all I could hear with clarity is take her out. So I killed my high school sweetheart.
Chain me to a troubled start, with wandering feet and a restless heart.
As soon as Tim had killed his wife, he tried killing himself with a heroin overdose, all while the couple's 1- and 3-year-old children were in the next room. Tim's suicide attempt failed, but he passed out for 3 days. He woke up Monday morning to the sound of his sister and the police beating on his front door. Tim eventually told the police everything that had happened.
They put handcuffs on me and locked me up. Because I turned myself in, they dropped it for murder to manslaughter and gave me 30 years. Sentenced me October the 1987, level 3 maximum security prison. And I'm 21 years old. I'm still mad at God. I'm still mad at my dad. I'm mad at the world. I've really built this wall around me that nobody's going to get in. And my answer to life is stay numb on dope, and anything you can get your hands on, you'll get through life.
For the next 7 years, Tim masterminded a drug dealing ring inside the prison. Then one day, in 1994, a fellow inmate invited Tim to go to a meeting with a ministry that happened to be visiting the prison. Tim had zero interest in anything Christian, but they were bringing homemade brownies.
Now, you don't tell a pothead about chocolate chip brownies. I got to tell you the truth, that reeled me in. I said, listen, if we're going to do chocolate chip brownies, sign me up.
The ministry was made up of a group of people from every walk of life who went into prisons to share the love of Jesus and to let inmates know that there was nothing that Jesus couldn't forgive. Something about that first night got Tim to thinking.
So I go home that night, and my roommate and I had rigged up a cooler with a false bottom in it where we had all of our marijuana stashed. And my normal ritual every night when they locked the doors and locked us in for the night, we'd get that cooler out and just roll joints until we went to sleep, just smoked until we passed out. So it was nothing different that night, except when Roger held that joint up to my upstairs bunk. I took a hit off of it, and I looked at it, and I thought, there's got to be more to life than this. I passed the joint back to him, and I wondered what the next day was going to look like, and fell off to sleep.
Nobody knew the troubles I've seen. Nobody knew my shame. Nobody knew the places I've been. I didn't know how to change.
The next day was going to look like no other day in Tim's life. He went back to the ministry meeting, and the first person to speak was an ex-con named Paul, who'd been involved with several murders. He talked about the way Jesus had transformed his life. Tim ran up to Paul afterwards and asked him if he really thought Jesus could transform him the same way.
He said, Tim, there's only one way to find